Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So, our mission here, as you know, is always the same. We take a single, really intense source, could be a report, a file, a set of personal notes, and we try to pull out the bigger universal lessons.
And the source we're digging into today is just, well, it's remarkable.
It's incredibly personal and honestly pretty harrowing. It's a driver's reflection on a near fatal moment, and they've titled it 1 Inch from the Graveyard Road Survival.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic piece of material because it basically compresses a lifetime of road lessons into 60 absolutely terrifying seconds.
Right.
So we're not just, reading a story about a close call. We're actually using this writer's perspective to really dissect the physics of it all and the psychology of risk when the margin for error just completely disappears.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The notes are almost forensic. They document the moment down to the minute. And this isn't just a story about someone driving too fast.
No, not at all.
It's about spatial awareness, decision-making under extreme pressure. We're looking at one specific moment on December 8th, 2025, where, like the title says, the difference between everything being fine and a total catastrophe was 1 inch.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we really need to understand how these two, seemingly abstract forces came together.
Okay, what are
You've got the unforgiving geometry of the road on one hand, and then you have this instantaneous, almost primal human impulse on the other.
Yeah.
And they just converge in that 1 minute. We're really asking, what was the road trying to tell the drivers, and why were those signals ignored?
We have to start with the scene itself. I mean, the source material almost treats the location like another character in the story. It was 4:10 in the afternoon, December 8th, 2025. A heavy winter evening, so you've got long shadows, the light is fading fast, which is a huge variable for visibility.
And the geography itself it amplifies that feeling of dread. The road is specifically noted as running right next to a cemetery, and it has this unsettling quietness about it. So this is a road that, by its reputation and its design, it already kind of tests fate. It just demands respect.
But the warnings weren't just, in the atmosphere. They were physical signs. The driver points out two specific yellow ride signs, calling them silent prophets.
I love that phrase.
It's great, isn't it? The first one is, a pretty standard right-hand curve sign. You see those everywhere.
Sure. But it's the second sign where the road really makes its demand clear. It's the winding road symbol.
The one on the diamond-shaped board.
Exactly. The one with the arrow that twists and turns, at least 3 times. That sign isn't just a suggestion. It's a non-negotiable directive.
And the source material just perfectly captures what that symbol is saying. It says, slow down. What lies ahead does not forgive mistakes.
Right.
So when we see a sign like that, a warning that's so clear, what is it in our psychology that so often makes us treat it as, a suggestion instead of a hard rule of physics?
Well, that gets into a really important question about how we perceive risk. There's a concept in traffic psychology called risk homeostasis.
Okay.
The basic idea is that drivers will adjust their behavior to maintain a level of risk they're personally comfortable with. So when they see a warning sign, they don't always see a hard limit. They see a challenge.
A challenge they think they can beat with their own skill.
Exactly. They start to negotiate with momentum, assuming they have the upper hand. The source, though, it says the driver did ease off the accelerator. They respected that warning.
But we know that respect wasn't shared by everyone on the road that evening.
Precisely. The road demanded respect for its complexity, but only one vehicle really gave it. And that, right there, that sets the stage for this catastrophic failure of shared space.
So we've got the static danger of the road itself. Now let's look at how adding a third vehicle, a dynamic element, made the geometry just instantly lethal. And this all played out over about a minute.
The writer uses this really helpful visual to describe the setup, to help us picture the trap. They call it the inverted triangle.
Right.
So imagine the bottom point of that triangle, the narrowest corner. That's where the narrator's car was.
Okay, I can picture that. It funnels you in. The sides of the triangle were the road's median on one side and the shoulder on the other. But the third vehicle was the real key to this whole destructive geometry, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. There's another car, a Mahindra Scorpio, and it's sort of hovering up near the top right corner, close to the median. So that car, along with the narrators, they form the two sides of this confinement zone.
The space between them.
Described as nothing more than a sliver, a gap the size of a breath that, no sane driver would ever even think about entering.
And yet,
a third vehicle, an auto rickshaw, saw that tiny sliver not as a warning, but as an open invitation. And that sudden, aggressive move, that's the pivot point for the whole thing.
It's the moment where, as the notes say, probability was just deliberately ignored.
And what's so fascinating here, and also deeply disturbing, is the spiritual irony of it all. The notes actually capture the name painted on the back of the auto.
Which was?
Dathwamasi. It means thou art that. It's a Sanskrit philosophical term. It speaks to unity, self-realization, the oneness of everything.
So that concept of unity just collided brutally with an act of pure selfishness. The source says the phrase became a paradox, an omen wearing spiritual clothing.
It's a perfect description. Instead of unity, it represented this violent tearing of shared space, of shared fate. The auto driver just dove into that gap with what the writer calls the recklessness of a sim racer.
A sim racer, someone who can just hit reset.
Right. They're playing a game. The consequences aren't real. But on this road, there are no resets. This was a willful tearing of reality, forcing the other two cars to somehow absorb his impossible decision.
The narrative describes the sound of the engine ripping through that gap as a shriek. And you can feel the psychological impact. The writer says their own breath just stopped, pupils dilated, palms frozen to the steering wheel.
And that's the brain's alarm system screaming. When you register an unavoidable, instantaneous, high lethality threat like something flying right at you in a confined space, you often get a freeze response.
You can't do anything.
You're immobilized because any move you make could cause a different, maybe worse, collision. The sheer speed of the event was just faster than conscious thought.
Which brings us right to the physical margin, the core of this deep dive, the title 1 inch. It's not an exaggeration.
No, it's a terrifyingly literal measurement. In high-speed maneuvers, an inch isn't a margin. It's statistical noise. The auto passed 1 inch from our speaker's right mirror and just 1 foot from the Scorpio's blind side.
1 inch, just so you can visualize that, that's about the width of your thumb. In a car, at speed, that is the literal difference between a near miss and metal violently scraping metal.
And we need to talk about why that 1 inch was so incredibly precarious. This whole thing happened on an outward banking curve. That is the critical factor. That's what took the risk from just high to potentially fatal.
Okay, so unpack the physics of that for us. Why is an outward banking curve so much more dangerous?
Well, think of it like this. Imagine you're walking on an icy slope that angles away from the mountain. You'd feel really unstable, right? You have to lean in and slow down just to stay on your feet.
Sure.
That outward bank, it's often there for water drainage, or maybe it's just old road design, but mechanically, it works against the physics of motion.
So when a car enters that curve, what's the force it's fighting?
It's centrifugal force. That's the force that's always pushing a moving object outward, away from the center of a curve. On a properly banked road, the road tilts inward, which helps you fight that push.
But on an outward banking curve,
that force is amplified. It's actively trying to shove both the narrator's car and the Scorpio toward the middle of the road.
And the auto driver, by jamming himself into that tiny gap, forced both of them into this instant, non-negotiable correction, while they were already fighting an active physical force.
Precisely. And this is where human reaction time comes in. You know, the average time it takes to see a hazard and just move your foot to the brake is about 3/4 of a second. The crisis moment here lasted maybe a second, maybe 2.
So the time you have to make a conscious choice is less than the time it takes just to start braking.
Yes. The decision was already made for them by the geometry and the speed. The source says if the Scorpio's driver had drifted by a whisper, or if some tiny external factor, a pebble, a gust of wind had happened, the vehicles would have been statistics.
The auto driver basically bet 3 lives on a maneuver with 0 margin for error.
0.
It goes right back to that idea that some moves are only safe on a screen. In the real world, physics is happening inches from your bones.
And that's the most powerful lesson, right? We think driving is elastic, that there's always a little room to correct. But what this teaches us is that momentum is fundamentally unforgiving. And sometimes, the width of a thumb is all that separates us from disaster.
So let's step back from the story for a second and distill the lessons. What are the major takeaways from this 1 inch moment?
The source material really offers 3 big shifts in perspective about what it means to operate a vehicle in a shared public space. And they go beyond just rules. They're about the philosophy of survival.
Okay, the first lesson the narrator pulled from this was that road safety isn't just discipline, it's survival. What's the real difference there?
Well, discipline is following rules because you're told to. It's about compliance. Survival is following the rules because you understand that the consequence of breaking them could be Well, extinction.
So it's about internalizing the why.
Exactly. When you realize that a speed limit sign isn't some arbitrary challenge, but it's a calculated equation based on the road surface, the geometry, reaction times, you shift from just complying to actively preserving yourself. The reckless driver wasn't just breaking a rule, he was inviting death.
The second takeaway connects directly to what we were just talking about, the curve. Safety demands respect for physics.
It is not enough just to know the rules of the road. You have to respect the rules of the universe.
Meaning you have to really understand things like momentum and trajectory and friction.
Yes, you have to internalize that a car going 60 miles per hour needs way more than double the stopping distance of a car at 30. The auto driver showed zero respect for the physics of his speed versus the space he had. He treated the laws of nature like they were flexible, and they're not.
And the third lesson, which for me is really the emotional heart of this whole thing, is the understanding that your life is never just yours when you're on the road.
This is so critical. Every high-risk decision you make, to tailgate, to speed, to dive into an unstable gap, is a decision that ripples out. It directly impacts the life and death of the people around you.
The safety of the narrator, the people in the Scorpio, even the auto driver himself.
Mhm.
It all rested on the actions of three separate people, all at the same time.
And that connects back to the paradox of that phrase, Bath Wamasi.
Thou art that.
Yes. Life and death, they really do share the same narrow road. That single inch, that single second, that single decision, they're not individual things. They are held collectively. The spiritual idea of thou art that stops being this abstract cosmic unity and becomes a tangible, frankly, frightening reminder that your fate is intertwined with every other driver out there.
In the eyes of physics, you are that other driver, and they are you.
Hmm. It's a sobering thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we've covered it all. The time, 16-point tone, the location, that winding road next to the cemetery, and that terrifying minuscule margin of 1 single inch.
The whole story serves as this brutal, visceral teaching moment. The geometry of the roads was fixed, the physics was known, the only real variable was human hubris.
A total disregard for shared space.
And the lesson is that true survival requires this constant awareness of the things you can't control, like a reckless sim racer appearing out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Rigid absolute control over the variables you can. Your speed, your position, your respect for the rules.
And that leaves us with one final provocative thought for you to consider the next time you're behind the wheel. If survival sometimes comes down to what the source called a stranger's sanity, what non-negotiable responsibilities do we truly owe to the invisible drivers traveling just 1 inch away from us? The ones who are depending entirely on the discipline we choose to show in that moment.